Hi, I'm Jackson Hayden, and today I'll be presenting on the Matthew effect. So the Matthew effect is based off the scripture in Matthew 25:29 that talks about, that basically talks about building up advantage. So if you have some kind of advantage early on, then it continues to build and build and build until eventually you have the most advantage. This is this is done like a lot of times in a lot of different ways in our lives, right? But one of the ways that is kind of it's at least for me as most used is in sports. So parents will take their kids and they will hold them back depending on when they were born so that they will do better in sports. And you can see statistically based like with specific sports how you like to like the graph of like, oh, this is when they were most born, this is when all of the kids' birthdays are because the cutoff day was this specific day, and they want to be as close to the cutoff as possible. So so that they can be because they'll be bigger kids and they'll do better in sports, and as they begin to be better in sports than in later life. So sorry. And then in later life they continue to have that advantage. Before we get to the graphs themselves, we did want to talk. I did want to talk about the chi-square test. The chi-square test is a way to validate if data is presentable or not, if it's like actually worth it. And I'll be showing later how I did use the chi-square test and the p-score to validate or invalidate the data. So we start with a null hypothesis. Basically, we're saying if that the null hypothesis is the data has no relation. There is no trackable thing within the data. Um, if it's all the same, if each sport had the same amount of births for each month, or it was just close enough that it wasn't really like a big enough difference to be able to chart or to study, then the chi-square test would let us know. So the null hypothesis, the chi-square test tells us whether or not we accept the null hypothesis. So the null hypothesis is uh, that that there is no relation between the number of players born in a specific month to the specific sport cutoff dates. So let's start with baseball. So baseball, you can see here I added a little line graph to kind of show the change depending on which month it is. And you can see here August is the month with the most births, and for baseball, the cutoff for age groups is July 31st. So July 31st comes around, and all of the August babies are put into baseball because and they're if they like they're right on the cutoff. So instead, they'll just hold them back a year so that they'll be more advantaged in the cutoff. And you can see as we get farther away from the cutoff, uh, it goes down, down, down. It starts going up a little bit towards the cutoff itself, because there's not much you can do about it if you're born the month right before. But you can see the rate of change is pretty consistent with the Matthew effect. In fact, the three most popular months to be born for baseball are the closest to the cutoff, and it's just after the cutoff. Those will be the biggest kids in baseball. Um, it's so much easier to see. I didn't even add a line graph for this one because it's just so clear, like the downward trend. Because in hockey, the cutoff is the new year, is December 31st. So you can see December has the least, and you can see here January has the most, and like it's just a downward trend the farther away you get from January. So that was I was like, oh yeah, that kind of plainly and clearly shows it. Now with football, it's a little harder. Maybe I should have added a line graph for this, but I will say it's harder to figure out. You can't. It's not as clear as these other graphs where it's like, oh, it's clearly the beginning of the year, or it's clearly August, or like the cutoff is clearly July 31st. For football, there's probably some other variable that we're not seeing because the cutoff, as according to the data as we got it, is July 31st. So it should be like August. August should be the highest. Now, it's not like August, September are like decently high when it comes to the other months, but January is the highest month, which is really interesting because maybe the age cutoff is different depending on the states, the data that we received. Maybe it has some other factors. Um, Basketball. is the same way. But with basketball, um, the trend is August 31st is the claimed cutoff for basketball. Um, so that again, there's like the trend's a little funky. It doesn't quite follow exactly the Matthew effect, but you'll notice July is the number one month. And my thought process was like, why would that be the number one month? Why would July before the cutoff be the number one month for births? And then I thought, basketball, as much as it is like a height advantage, it's not really about height when you're a youth. It's not like everyone's like, even if they're a few inches taller, like the taller you get, the lankier your legs. Like it's hard, like you lose some motor capabilities when you get a little taller. So I was like, oh, I thought about it. I was like, oh, you want a shorter kid or a faster kid, really, what it comes down to for basketball. If you want to give a kid the advantage in basketball, you want them to be fast. You want them to be able to get one court to the other fast instead of in football where it prioritizes size and strength, or in hockey where it's size and strength, or in baseball where it's just pure like strength in the arms and in the legs instead of like a physical whole body strength like in football. Um, but I do like the idea. It does still follow enough of an effect to study. Now that with that in mind, let me take you to the results of the chi-square test of independence. So over here you can see I inputted the observed counts for each month of birth and each sport. And like just like you saw in the charts, it's just kind of put into an Excel spreadsheet. And we can see here the expected count is above 5, which is one of the rules that for the p-score to be validated. Our DF is 33, and our p-value is so small that because like it would just be normal zero if it was normal zero. If there was something off in the calculations and it was exactly zero, we'd have an issue. But it's so small that it can't even be like it's probably a bunch more zeros that I'd have to put in, which means that the p-value is low enough to invalidate the null hypothesis. So if we invalidate the null hypothesis, that means that this data is chartable and valid. I'll include the link to my workbook and to my results to the the assignment turn-in. But in conclusion, the Matthew effect, I do believe, is in full force. As much as it wasn't as clear during the football and baseball charts, there was still something. I feel like football, if I was to go back, I would do more study on where the football data came from, why it is the way that it is, and kind of dig more deeper into that and maybe see why kids in football would have different advantages depending on different times of the year. But I do think that even though the Matthew effect is not like the same in every sport, like where you want like big kids or smaller kids, depending on the sport, the Matthew effect is still real. The advantages given to kids are still real. And these kids, like, they continue to have these same cutoffs, these same advantages. The advantages build upon each other until eventually not a lot of these kids, but a lot of pros have these advantages beforehand. And yeah, thank you for watching my study.